Okay, I'll call this meeting to order. Motion to adopt the agenda for this evening, or this afternoon, please. Councillor Boot, thank you. Councillor Holmes?
Yeah, could I make a comment?
Yes?
Could I just request that we move the South Okanagan Sailing Association 2 spots down to after the Chamber of Commerce?
Yes, ma'am.
At which I checked that out with our finance director, she's okay with it. Just so I would then recuse myself before we start any new recreation providers.
Okay. So did you get that?
Yeah.
What are we doing exactly, since I didn't?
Sorry?
Since I didn't?
Yeah, we can, we're just going to change the order of the items being discussed,
Yeah,
but it doesn't
okay.
affect the actual agenda, so. it
Okay,
should
so
be
we're doing
fine.
all the church things all
Yeah.
first, right? Right.
Correct.
Okay.
Question on the motion to adopt the agenda?
Oh, right. Okay. All in favor? Adopt the agenda, thank you. Opposed? Motion's passed. So we're into 3.1, which is the bulk of the program here on permissive tax exemptions. CFO.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So we're going to start with a bit of a presentation just to remind Council of the information we covered earlier this year when we had a workshop about permissive tax exemptions and some of the legislation that covers this part of the exemptions and some strategies to consider. Just a brief overview. There's some more or additional information that Council requested at our last meeting that we've got, and a little bit of an update on what other communities are doing. So we'll just get started with that, and then we'll move into the review of the organizations on a one-by-one basis.
Thank you.
So the governing statute, just to remind all members of the council, is that it is the community charter, and there is a requirement to have a bylaw adopted prior to October 31st. That council has absolute discretion to approve exemptions. The only caveat there is to be sure that the process is not discriminatory and does not infringe upon any rights such as freedom of religion or equality. Council certainly has the decision-making ability to give to one organization and not to another, as long as the reasons are clearly explained. And as we go forward, the reasons for giving to one and not another would come up under these categories of consistency, certainty, or financial impact.
So excuse me, I'm surprised that we can consider financial impact, but that is part of the regs we operate under, right?
Financial impact to the district.
Oh, I thought it
so-
was to the,
Sorry, no, the financial impact to the district. So
Okay.
that would be a
no, I understand.
decision-making process where one organization is more closely aligned with the strategic goals of council, and so you would choose to give them a bigger
Okay.
piece of the pie that you're
Gotcha.
divvying up. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So consistency really is important to the organizations that the district supports. And the use of the permissive tax exemptions, just a reminder, is that it does allow these not-for-profit groups to achieve the community's goals, values, and help to satisfy needs, whether they be social or cultural. We can look at consistency across the kinds of organizations or the benefit for the community, or are there specific groups that council wants to select to provide a higher level of support to provide better services? So those are all questions to keep in mind as we're going through the organizations and looking at their applications. So certainty, the duration of the exemption. So 10 years or less is legislated for everything, every organization except for places of worship by the community charter. And so a particular set of circumstances that makes it more desirable for organizations to know the level of support they're going to be getting is if they're making an investment in their infrastructure or the building they're in, the facility they're using, that sort of thing. So the longer time frame is certainly more desirable from their point of view. And then just another piece of information to consider when we're looking at the level of exemption could be general access, public access. So where you might have an organization that has a membership and has exclusive use of the facility for their members during parts of the day or certain times of the year, but at other times is opening it up more broadly to the community as a whole. Those are considerations to weigh when you're looking at the amount of support that you want to give to these particular groups. And again, just a reminder that permissive exemptions really are a grant. Any exemption that is given means it's property tax revenue council's choosing to forego. And we talked about the leveraging of it in that, because it includes exemptions for the other levels of government and organizations that we collect on behalf of, being, the RDOS or the hospital, it's gone from my mind the right name for that, but the hospital piece of the RDOS, or the Municipal Finance Authority, BCA, those organizations that we collect on behalf of the school tax for the province. So organizations receive exemptions from all levels of property taxation through the decision-making process. And of course, council supports organizations in a few ways. It could be through this permissive tax exemption process, a direct grant and aid. Often we have properties or facilities that not-for-profit groups occupy at less than market rates, and we, as an organization, sometimes provide in-kind services to them. So when we consider that service delivery model, which is the value of that support that council is choosing to give the not-for-profit organization, sometimes we need to compare that to what would the cost be if the district were providing that service. So if we look at the recreation sector in particular, that's where that becomes a relevant consideration. If we have an organization that has their own facility, they are providing recreation service that our own district isn't currently doing or doesn't have the means to do, often providing them with permissive exemptions or other levels of support through grant and aid, that sort of thing, is a better cost alternative for the district than us undertaking the service ourselves. So there were a couple of information requests from the last time that we met. One was to do with the Legion. So we did a little bit of research on that and found that prior to 2013, there was no permissive tax exemptions granted for the Legion. You can see from the chart inserted there that in 2013, the assessed values were double, basically, what they are the next year. So that was the year that a lot of properties along Rosedale had increased property assessments, and the Legion came to the district to ask for some support in dealing with the increase in property taxes caused by that. So in 2013, 50% of the assessed value for Class 8 was given as a permissive exemption, and $10,000 on Class 6. In 2014 and 2015, where the assessments were revised by the Assessment Authority, 100% of Class 8 and nothing on Class 6 for the Legion. So the Summerland Golf Society, there was a question around the users of that facility and how many are Summerlanders and how many are coming from outside and the impact on tourism, those sorts of things. So we did request that the organization provide us with updated information, and they haven't yet done so. But in looking back at previous applications, we found some 2013 statistical information saying that 25% of the rounds of golf are played by non-residents. So whether that's still true for 2015, we don't know, but we will follow up. Yes.
Yes, so what's the implication of the difference or the balance?
This was looked at in response to a question from Councillor Carlson, who was interested in knowing that breakdown for the use of the facility.
Okay, I guess I'm just wondering, given that, what is supposed to be the impact on exemption for non-resident versus resident? Are you saying that 25% of the value would be not exempted? Is that what you're saying?
No.
Just simply a response. Some individuals may feel that that's a fair way of doing it. I have no idea if that's where the question came from, but
Okay.
but it's nothing set. It's just a
Okay, I just
response.
wondered what the potential implications might be for their whatever status they have now.
So one thing that you might, that council could consider is if there is a belief that the fee structure in Summerland is at the level it is today because of one of the factors that allows that is the support that the golf course receives from the district in terms of permissive exemptions. And that's a lower fee than in a neighboring community.
I understand now, okay.
Then perhaps that isn't the desired result
Yeah,
that the council wants by allowing the exemption.
yeah, it isn't lower, but anyway, yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Councillor Boot?
I guess this bears into the conversation. To play at the Summerland Golf Club, do you have to be a member?
No,
Okay. So those non-residents are non-members?
that's correct. Not necessarily.
Possibly.
Not
possibly.
necessarily.
Right.
In fact, we have a number of members from outside the community.
Okay, thanks. Let's move on.
All right, so one other request that was that we received at the end of the last meeting was identification of property not actively used by an organization. And in the report, there were five organizations where, upon review of the properties on the maps that we had, Renee and Linda and I reviewed them and made some, estimations of what we felt may be property that was not actively used, where there were separate parcels of land or land. We made sure that that would be land that was suitable for use if we were identifying it as being not actively used. So we had one property where it was very steep and it couldn't be used even though it was very large. And then the size of the membership of the organization to make sure that we were allowing for adequate parking. Say the Legion has a very large membership and they have a large parking lot versus an organization that maybe has 40 members and how much parking they might require. So we took those factors into consideration and we did identify 5 organizations. And as we go through them, you'll see on the revised maps that we have identified those areas with another color as we go through and do the review. And then the Summerland Youth Center Association, that was a property that we were looking at the use of it, and there were 4 distinct areas on the property, even though it had been historically considered as one property. So just wanting to inform you that we've revised the totals and the calculation of the permissive piece only to apply to the Summerland Youth Center Association. So the other 3 distinct areas on the property, 2 of which are leases, one of which is a lease for the building supply store, and then the district use for our skateboard park, and our recreation department uses part of it for storage as well. So that's a change from the information that you had previously. So just wanted to make sure that everyone is aware of the process around that.
Excuse me, that doesn't impact the youth center itself, though, does it?
No, but it does change the totals. So if you took the report you have today and compared it back to the one we were talking about 2 weeks ago, or whenever that was, you would see that the numbers changed. And I just wanted to point that out.
Councillor Holmes?
Sorry, can you scroll back down to the last slide? So the district leases the land from the youth center? For the skateboard park, or the other way around?
We own
The
it.
district owns that whole
Okay.
piece of property, and the youth center occupies part of it, and the building supply store occupies part of it through leases. And then we have our own use, the skateboard park, and some storage.
So the district owns all of it,
Yes,
and it leases to the youth center, to the building supply store,
yes.
and the skateboard park is leased to the youth center,
No.
or no, it's just?
It's
District,
district,
yeah, okay.
district, yes. Yes.
Oh,
The-
sorry, Councillor
yeah.
Parker.
The BC Assessment Authority doesn't do any assessment for municipal-owned land, right?
That's correct. Like, the assessed values on municipally owned land aren't as in tune with market as the other pieces of property in the community may be. But that being said, we contacted BCA about this,
Mhm.
and their suggestion back to us was just to prorate the land values. So there is only one building value on there, and it's been attributed to the Summerland Youth Center, who is occupying that building. And then, the other properties prorated. So they may take a look at that for 2016 because of the change.
But for
So-
clarity, Richard, or Councillor Barkwell, they do put assessment on municipal property. It's just that municipal buildings are statutorily exempt. So and like Laurie said, they don't keep up with it that well sometimes. So sometimes they can be out of date if you're moving into a situation where you're leasing out your municipal land.
So did they raise an assessment and be sending a tax notice to somebody for this property? I mean,
Because it's statutorily exempt, so
there was no tax notice. So, even for the building?
Right. The whole property was exempted.
Okay, so if we, so they get an exemption by default, and I'm assuming here the youth center, right? No, because no taxes were assessed for that building?
It's always appeared on the permissive exemption bylaw.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that was the entire piece rather than only the part they were occupying.
Mm-hmm.
So now, BCA will establish 2 new folios for that one piece. So we'd have 3 pieces
Mhm.
now for that one. One that had the value for the youth center, one that'll have the value for the timber mart, and one that will have the district value.
Will they
So
now
the-
send a tax notice to the youth center, or no?
If council chooses to give the youth center a permissive exemption for the full amount, there would be no tax notice because
Mhm.
there'd be no taxes.
The real issue is the building supply.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
the biggest change, because they're not a nonprofit, and they've been on that property, so there'll be implications on that.
So there'll be a tax notice to them next year? To the building supply for their lease? Because it has to be a lease, right, to be picked up by BC Assessment?
And we'll be fine tuning that
Mhm.
whether or not there's a tax notice that comes and it's incorporated into their lease. So that's, but essentially, yes.
But it would be, be the only property of the 3 that's likely to generate anything in the way of.
Unless
Back-
council didn't do
yeah,
a
yeah.
exemption for
Well,
them.
there'd be no reason for us to perhaps exempt that, because the other 2 rationally, yes, we would exempt.
No, yeah, well,
It's not eligible because it's occupied
That's
by
right.
a
you
for-profit
couldn't,
Yeah.
you couldn't. yeah.
business.
Yeah, that's right.
But as long as you didn't change your whole practices and
yeah.
now.
Anyway, let's move, everybody satisfied? Can we move on? Councillor Peak?
I just want to restate restate something that Richard said so I better understand it. So the youth center is on district land. It's a building that belongs to district and is leased to the youth center?
No, the youth center owns their own building that was constructed on district land.
They own it on
So if for some reason we didn't renew the lease or they chose to leave, it would entail physically picking up their building and moving it to an alternate location.
Conversely, why do they need a tax exemption if they don't pay taxes on the loan?
Well, because the property is registered as being owned by the District of Summerland, it would be just statutorily exempt. Everything we own is exempt. Historically, however it got there, I'm not sure, but it's been on the permissive tax exemption roll for the entire value of the property. It does belong on the permissive tax exemption bylaw for the piece that the youth center occupies, and not the rest. So
Understand that.
that's what we're gonna try and fix, yes.
But no, but just, again, this is important, I know it's tedious, but it's an important point. And it's, so I heard you say for the building, but even though it's municipal land that's leased to someone else is taxable then. And what needs to happen is that the BC assessment needs to be notified to make sure that they invoke taxes, or take the statutory exemption
Thank
off
you,
of
that
it.
better restates the problem I was having
Right.
with it.
Okay.
Thank you
Excuse
very
me.
much for
That's
that.
Counselor Barkwell?
So for this year, because they don't really even know that there's a building there, if we decided not to give the youth center an exemption, we still wouldn't get $13,000 in tax or whatever the exemption was? Because there was no tax notice sent to anybody? 'Cause
For
it-
2015?
Yeah, or 20,
Well, for
I guess we're
20
dealing with the coming year,
20
2016.
That's
aren't we?
right,
So it's
exactly.
not, but for 2015, if there'd been no exemption given, there would have been no tax paid, I guess.
If council hadn't given a permissive
Yeah.
exemption, because it would have shown as district,
Yeah.
yes,
Wouldn't
but-
have attracted taxes.
Mm.
right. But that wasn't an issue because it received a permissive.
We're too detailed.
Okay. We're good?
No, it's,
Oh,
it's highly important. It's
Counselor
good.
Boot? Yeah.
Sorry, like you said, this is tedious, and I don't understand it yet. So, regardless of the other two leases on that spot, the district owns the land the youth center is on.
Renee,
They-
would you mind, sorry, could you bring the map up for that one? I think it just might be easier if we looked
Okay.
at the picture. I think it's at the very end. Two from the end.
It's my favorite.
Were there?
Oh, here.
Here, I'll eat
touch
half
your
and then I'll
sausage.
give you some.
Oh, thank you. I'll eat the
You
first
want
half
this?
and then I'll hold.
That one.
Pass them on to the
Thank you.
rabble over there.
Thank you.
I'll both have next time.
Yeah.
I heard that, Mr. Mayor.
There's an extra one.
Oh, that's why it looked like that, sorry.
Did everybody get one?
I think you might be able to answer my question without the math even.
Yeah,
We're almost there.
but you
Okay.
maybe
I'm
start,
getting there.
Start your question, there we go.
So, the district owns the land, the Youth Center Society, or whatever they're called, Harold
Hey,
Simpson,
please.
owns the building.
Yes, they constructed the building.
So, if we own the land and we automatically are tax exempt, why would there be a need for a permissive
so
tax
that's where
exemption
that's where
anyways?
we're getting a little bit of mix-up. That's the crux of the problem, and that is your municipal land is statutorily exempt
Exempt.
if there's a municipal building on it. If it's
Okay.
not a municipal building, if it's because we can have land that there's a business on, that we lease it out. So if we lease it out to any private entity, or a childcare center, or a, anything, Chamber of Commerce, then it needs to be in a perfect world, and when there's been no mistakes made in the past, and the lease is registered on title, et cetera, that statutory exemption goes away. And there, assess taxes the same as anybody else would be. The fact that it's municipal land doesn't matter.
But if it's a nonprofit, it would,
If it's a
Potentially.
nonprofit, then they apply for
Exactly.
consideration
Yeah.
of exemption. And in Summerland, you historically have given this type of organization
Full.
exemption, but not all municipalities do.
good.
Okay,
Okay.
so I will be asking the question again later.
Yeah, because it's important, like, because that's, I mean, that's not just relevant in this one, it's
To this
relevant in
one.
a number.
Yeah.
So it's an important concept to get.
Thank you.
Everybody okay?
Thank you.
That was good, thank you for the question. CFO?
I think we're done with the, oh no, we've got the other communities still. We'll go back to the presentation. So for council's information, we contacted a few comparator communities, not as many as our workshop. I think we had a list of 5 or 6 in total. Some communities are still where we are at, making the decision. But for the ones who have considered their bylaws, this was the information that we were able to find. The level of permissive exemptions as a percentage of their property tax revenues.
So some of them went up from the list that we had before.
Yes.
And what is our percentage right now?
1.7.
Last year's, yes.
That was 1.3.
115, 2015 says 1.7 on this.
Our last year's ones.
1.3 is just a proposed average. Yeah.
Okay. Counselor Holmes?
So comparing with other communities is a bit like comparing apples and oranges, where the consideration factors that you had earlier could vary widely from one community to the other, correct?
I think that's true statement for any kind of comparison we try to do of our district to anyone else. There are always many, many factors that councils will consider.
But one of the key ones, just a minute, Richard, one of the key ones would be the size of your tax base.
No, because it's percentage.
It's a
Yeah.
percentage, so.
Yeah, okay.
So it's
Yeah,
right.
okay. Counselor Barkle?
But I do take Councillor Holmes' point. I think it's a very rough guide, and I would only to see that if you're wildly out of step by being 8% instead of 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, our values have a lot more to do with it than the percentage.
I think if there was more time and more, there wasn't so much for council to be looking at, it is worth it, and maybe it'll happen before the end of this 4 years. It's really good to really understand the implications in your community along with the other things that you're exempting. Not to say that you want to decrease it, but to be able to speak really clearly about what you provide, how it fits in with your priorities. And too many councils I've seen just really can't do it because they haven't been able to take the time. And that's why I keep talking about it a lot, because it comes into the discussions when asset management comes up. It comes up all the time. So this is really a small piece, and it does become relevant to know the percentages in the long run, because you can talk about the priorities in your districts or the priorities in other words, and how they change, and how they differ. So this is all sort of planting seeds for future work when you have more. But I think you'll see in the long run that you probably do want to know all of this to really be able to speak about what it is that you contribute in your community.
Good? Okay, CFO?
So I think that we're near to the end. Strategies to consider. So in the report that's on the agenda today, just has this structure to it. So we'll just go through it briefly. Is that, as a council, you could decide to set a certain percentage of the property tax revenue as the total amount that you would consider for granting permissive exemptions. We can look at those specific properties where we've suggested there may be some excess land use there that could be viewed as an investment rather than actively used in the service delivery. And council could decide on each case or on all of them to not grant exemptions for those pieces. We could apply a percentage reduction so that all organizations receive a piece of a smaller pie, so the same ratio that they've historically received, but the total dollar amount is smaller, so they each get a certain percentage. Or we could, council could choose to go through and on a case-by-case basis confirm the level of exemption that they wish to give to that organization. So,
I think, that last comment is critical, but it's the sort of thing that may be very difficult to do this time round, because it's a matter of looking at how the strat plan and how exemptions in the budget and the overall tax implications impinge. So it's difficult to look at your previous slide there that said about the strat plan aspect.
and so perhaps that's food for thought for a future
yeah.
cycle. The last note, just to recognize that organizations are used to a certain level of support or historically have received it, that if council does decide to give a significant reduction to any organization, that we need to give thought perhaps to sufficient notice time for them to be able to adapt to that, yes.
What's sufficient notice, like
A year.
90 days, a year?
I would say a year. I
A
think
year.
that, at this point, now to say, in next year, you're going to have $5,000 less than you had before is difficult for many of these organizations.
Right.
But, I mean, that's certainly at your discretion as council to determine what you feel sufficient is. Yeah.
Councillor Peak?
Even a year can be insufficient, depending if they've had
Oh, yeah.
generally PTE for 10 years or 15 years, it would be very difficult.
Might be.
Councillor Holmes, Councillor Carlson, and the CAO. Do you want to go first, because it's important to go first?
No, it's not important to go first. It's something I have to add.
Okay.
Yeah, I think, moving forward, we ought to, after our strategic planning, we ought to, I don't know, if the process to set up a select committee or something to look at how we want to approach PTEs in the future, and so that we can align with our strategic goals. I don't think, I agree with what's been said here, that I don't think we can make radical changes this year, but I think once we've done our strategic planning, we should make, just like anything, figure out how these things can fit in with our strategic goals.
Councillor Carlson?
Just to follow up on that, when I look at all the options, 1, 2, especially between 1 and 2 and even 2 and 3 in most cases, really not a very significant difference for 95% of them. There's a couple that might be a couple $1,000 difference, but we're not talking about a few $1,000s. We're talking about maybe a couple hundred in most cases. So I would just like to suggest that for the most part, it's not necessarily going to be a huge pain if we decide we're only give 90% of what they got last year. And I've got some more information to share later, but we're not there yet, I guess.
Anybody else? CAO?
I just wanted to, just a sort of overall statement again, I tend to agree that it's very difficult for councils to, pull it out, especially in organizations that have been getting it for quite some time. But I think that the idea of having some sort of select committee or something and doing a deep dive, especially in a community like this where you're facing more and more pressures over the infrastructures and all, and you want to find that battle, because there's strategies that you can implement. There's strategies where you can actually assist organizations to do a slow
Transition.
to transition and to make them recognize is that there's tough choices that they have to make. There's sometimes they're located in places where it just doesn't make sense that that's what they're located. They could move to a, you know, they might have land that they can sell and they could move, or there's different, it shouldn't be always dependent on operating, because you may at times cause other businesses not to come into your communities because you have so many funded opportunities that they can never compete on a market base. So it's not a bad idea to look at it as a long-term strategy to say, what can we do to assist these groups to become self-sustaining, and how can you do that over a period of time? But it certainly can't be done.
I think the idea of a select committee is a good one, because the ramifications, I think, go beyond what the CAO just mentioned. There's social implications, there's also the implications of certain services or organizations being there or not being there that make your community less or more attractive. So there's a lot of extenuating circumstances that can apply, especially when some of these organizations are doing a lot of fat trimming in terms of trying to meet their present exemption, status and other operational things. So in a lot of things, outfits have done things where they do an awful lot of volunteer stuff. So anyway, but let's move on. Councillor Carlson?
Are we moving on to talk about this?
Yep.
Is this our next step?
That's the idea.
I've been looking at some ALC documents from when the Alliance Church was given permission to build and that land was taken out of the ALR. And there's a lot of discussion about that blue section in the back that in this conversation has been taken away from, we can see what the implication would be if that land was given a tax exemption, and it's quite significant. And ever since 1999, when this church was basically, what happened was they said we would like this to be institutional for the front half and keep the back half ALR, and perhaps the opportunity to amalgamate it with a neighboring parcel or lease it out at a decent rate to a farmer or let someone do a market garden or something like that will be a good option, and the church will therefore be able to continue to own that land and it will be productive. It's been 15 years and that land has never been used into production. It's no longer in the ALR, and I strongly believe it should not be given a full permissive tax exemption unless there is some good reason for it and there is plans to turn it into a viable working piece of land.
Councillor Barkwell?
I think along those lines is that the reason it's sitting there doing nothing is because it hasn't cost them anything. If you start to
Absolutely.
charge them the taxes on it, they'll have a look at it and put it into productive use.
So maybe there's a warning within, like we were just talking about, it's not necessarily fair to say we're going to take that all away from you, but I do think that we need to encourage them to turn it into something viable because it's a beautiful piece of land.
Yeah, just before I get to you, Councillor Peak, that's an approach the assessment authority does with farmland, as you know, that you have a certain time frame to prove that you're going to be in production. And I think it's only fair with some of these outfits to say, okay, this is what we're thinking. If you can, over a period of 3 years, 5 years, move towards making this a productive agricultural piece, then you've satisfied the requirements, or you would no longer be exempt. But if you're going to use it for church property, well, then use it. So, anyway, Councillor Peak, I think. Right?
That would be partly my point as well. You have to start a dialogue
Yeah.
to say that, to send the messaging out that you're considering a change and why you might be considering the change, so they have an opportunity to address it in some manner.
Fairness
And
is
sufficient time.
fairness has got to be the watchword on this kind of stuff as we move forward. Councillor Barkwell.
So it seems like we're all kind of in agreement here. How do we actually move forward on this? Do we pass a resolution that that we should direct staff to send a notice to the Alliance that their exemption may very well not be there next year, or can we just make it is that what we should do?
Councillor Holmes and Councillor Peak.
It seems a bit heavy-handed to me. I would say that's where the role of a select committee comes in.
Yeah.
I would say the select committee would meet with every recipient of a PTE individually and talk to them.
Yeah, personally, I think that's the way to go. Counselor Peak?
I agree, you can't do a preemptive strike.
No.
You gotta-
Well, okay, I just wondered what do we do to make sure
yeah,
something
but
happens?
We're
right?
representatives of the public, so we do it in a very diplomatic manner.
Yeah, Counselor Carlson?
And that is not just ALR land. You know, you look at something on Julia Street, and there's quite a lot of beautiful parking space there that conversation should happen, because some affordable housing of some sort, you know, something different might be more viable, and that should be something that gets put out on the radar and talked about individually. So it's not just that I want us to be farming that land, it's that I think there's a much better use of the space, and people should be paying for
Yeah.
what they're just holding on to.
No, I think you're quite right, but I think what Councillor Holmes has addressed is that the select committee will look at each one, and I think there needs to be the discussion on their status, you know, as to where they fit, because it is up to our discretion as to what sort of percentage we want to go to on each one. So,
Because bottom line, you always have to realize that taxpayers are paying, you know,
Yep.
your
Oh, yeah.
taxpayers are paying for
Yep.
property like that, and that's what you always have to keep in mind when you're saying that, someone's paying the taxes.
but I think the approach is that fairness has to be the way to go. You can't suddenly jump, and I think that's what Councillor Holmes is saying. Councillor Trainer?
So it sounds like we can't really make any drastic changes right now. Like we pretty much have to do what they got last year, this year, no?
I've been on councils before where they were sitting in exactly this, and they went through and they took them all the excess ones, and they've done it. I've been in other councils where they've done a approach where they've given a year's notice, and I've been in another one where they did a whole review, so there's no right answer to.
Okay, but for example, in order to be fair and allow them to prepare, we could take the option where we knock it back to 90% for them all. This is just for example, because that's not really a big hit for 2016, and then we would have our committee next year to make any larger changes for 2017. Is that kind of how it works?
Mm-hmm.
That would
You
be-
absolutely could do it that
Okay.
way.
I like that idea.
We could. Let's keep going on. You want to go through your series?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So the next,
How do you want to do this,
Yeah.
CFO? Are you looking at each one and making a bit of a decision, or are we going to go through them all and make it? Because I
We
looked
should
at
just
some of
make
your
a general
options, and
decision.
you know, option 3 seemed like a good one, but it may be involving more comprehensive work than we're prepared to do at this time for this year.
right, so maybe I might suggest that if council's prepared to make some kind of resolution at this motion,
Yeah,
or,
yeah.
you
You
know,
could
if
just
we-
be, that if that's the discussion you want to have, that, for example, that you want to pass a resolution to prepare a bylaw at 90% of all of the existing and the 2 new ones, and to form a select committee, then that's fair enough, and you should make that resolution, and we'll work on that bylaw. There's no need to look through them
Okay.
all at once if you feel that that's.
Okay, what the next question I have relative to that is, granted, Councillor Carlson made the comment that, you know, it doesn't appear as though there's a large significant dollar. But what I would like to ask the CFO is where there has been, you know, basically a fairly large exemption in the past, hence we're working with percentages, is a reduction of, you know, 10% going to mean a significant hit for, say, 2 or 3 of these organizations? I granted most of them are probably
For
not
the
much of
KBR
effect,
it would be.
but
So if you look in the table that's on page 4 of the agenda, option 3, well, that's not the good one to use. Say option 4 is 90,000. Let me do the math on that to see what kind of reduction that
93.28?
is. Pardon me?
it's 93.28 at the bottom.
That total, yeah. I just want to see what that percentage is. So that's a 80%. So that's a 20% reduction.
Yeah.
If you compare option 4 to option 2. Yeah, that's a 20% reduction. And you can see that, say, for the Kettle Valley Railway, 21,300 down to 16,900. That would be the most significant one. The golf Society is another one, from 17,500 down to 13,900.
Lori and I did have a conversation about KVR, because, so any of the, if you do across the board do 90% reduction, you do have some where you generally also entertain grant and aid. And KVR did come and ask for a grant and aid this year. If you think that you're going to be supplying extra,
You got a calculator I can borrow, please?
if you think you're gonna be doing extra, then it's more beneficial to keep the permissive tax exemption at the 100%, because their bang for the buck is bigger when they have the exemption on the school taxes. So if there's any that are in there, like the KVR, where you would be supplementing, then you may not want to include them in the 90% reduction. So that's the other option, is to go 90% on almost all of them, and then pick and choose if there's any specifics you want to maintain the 100 at. Did you?
Or alternately, go to lower than 90%,
Or
right?
precisely, any amount that,
Well, overall, looking at 90%, which is option 2,
Right?
that's 113 versus 125 if we kept up with the current exemption level, correct?
Yeah, it's not quite 90%, 92
It's-
point, but close,
It's
yeah.
awful close.
Yeah.
So that's 12,000.
So
Which is 90% cost?
that's a gain of
Number-
close to
number two
$12,000 or
is 90%.
$13,000.
92%, so, yeah,
Number 2.
number 2.
Option
That's the
2.
same dollar value
number
as
4?
2015.
Right, so that's just 92% of what they've asked for this year,
Yeah.
Right.
which gives them very similar likely, oh, there's 2 extra on there, to what they got last year, so.
Is option 1 what was granted last year, or is it just what's been asked for this year?
It's
Request.
just what's been asked for this year.
Okay.
Which one, I'm sorry, Kate?
Option
Option
1.
Thank you. And that's an increase from last year because of the increase in assessments.
It's an increase due to new requests
Okay.
and
New
Change.
allocation.
Okay,
Yeah.
how much was last year's?
113,600, column 2.
Which is column 2.
The same amount of money. That was our discussion, we'll give the same.
Yeah, no, what I'm
amount.
driving at is that we would, if we were this year to go with last year's level, it would be 92% of the request for 215,
Yes.
216.
right?
Yes.
For
So
260.
in order, if we were to say to ourselves that, okay, we got no more money this year than last year, we have 2 more organizations that are requesting. Therefore, a reduction across the board is somewhat justified, or is justified, because we've only got so much to go around. Either that, or we look specifically, and maybe we can't do that until the select committee looks at things, but
Right.
maybe there's 1 or 2 organizations that shouldn't be in there at all. Or we can find ways of fine tuning that will allow us to, find room for additional organizations because we've redistributed,
That's right.
right?
That's exactly right. So option 2 is the same dollar value of exemption as the current year.
And it's taken me a little while to get it through my head, but I think looking at, you're the one that can tell us in terms of, probably in terms of what the expectations are for revenue. Maybe you don't know that yet for next year, of course, but
For
if we
taxation?
were to see an 8% increase in revenue, for example, then we would be able to meet the option 1, which is the 2016 requirement, without having any significant hit on the other programs.
We don't have the non-market change information yet from BC Assessment, so we really don't have any
Yeah.
information on how much additional property taxes, how
Okay.
much new property tax we're going to have.
So I think we're, personally, I don't know what anybody else thinks, but I think we're entirely justified with going with what we did last year, which is a 92% or an 8% reduction in the total request. Correct, Councillor Barkle?
I don't know if that's what happened last year, but I was just thinking, how are 7 people all going to agree on
We're
what
not.
the
That's
exemptions
why we're gonna
are supposed
vote.
to- So, we've heard an awful lot of options, almost a bewildering number of options. one of the things that sort of was talked about and forgotten about was these 5 here with the properties. I would like to see at least, if we're going make a start on reducing this list of exemptions for properties that aren't being used, even if some people feel it's too much to do all at once. Maybe 50%, take that number and say, take at least 50% of it off this year.
That's an idea.
Just throwing another wrinkle in the mix.
Like option 3, but a little bit higher for the ones that have been, that are taking the hit on it,
Councillor
right?
Peak and Councillor Booth.
I would find that difficult without a community discussion,
Yeah.
without a select committee.
Yeah.
I need a process in place, and the backlash you get from the community if you don't do it properly would not be very good. And not a healthy thing to have happen.
Councillor Booth and Councillor Trainer.
I like the idea of going with option 2 with that 7.5% reduction. I also like the idea of looking at those 5 that are on that page. Not to give the reduction now, but for the select committee to, or for council to say, we are looking at this and the process will move forward. Just a second,
Go
not
ahead. I
done.
haven't said anything.
And, I think that there are a couple in here that perhaps we need to look at a little bit more closely.
Councillor Trainer, sorry.
I
I keep forgetting who you are.
I agree with Councillor Booth. When you said look at a few, did you mean this year or did you mean once the committee's formed for next year?
I mean this year.
Okay.
I'm not saying just wipe it out or
Mhm.
50% or whatever. I'm just
Mhm.
saying maybe less than the 92.5.
Okay. I think I'm leaning towards option number 2, and then letting everybody know that we're gonna be forming a committee and talking to them all next year and educating them on what we're learning here, and if they are going to face a reduction, why they are.
Yep.
So they had events.
Thank you. I-
Yeah,
yes.
that gives them learning, and it's fair.
Okay, any further comments, CFO?
Only just a reminder that we are on a tight time
Yep.
frame, and we really do need a decision
Okay.
today.
I
They,
think,
they would need to pass a
Yeah.
resolution to.
I think my objective tonight is to actually come for a resolution. And I think we're pretty close, and I think we probably need 2 resolutions. 1 to define the exemption level, and 2 to, we don't have to do the other now, but to pass a motion to, I guess it's a recommendation to council, is it?
The select
Wait.
committee resolution you would just bring at the council meeting,
At
because
a
it's,
later time.
your recommendation is just in order
Okay.
to get the bylaw started.
Okay, well, we just need the 1 then, yeah. So would someone like to bring a motion forward, please?
Is this for the committee?
No, it's,
It's to satisfy, no, this is, we're not dealing with the committee idea at this present time.
To decide how much we're
The
gonna be.
finance department
offering.
needs a resolution to move forward so they meet their dates.
So I don't think you're necessarily all on the same page yet, but if someone brings a resolution forward, then you can discuss it and then,
Yeah.
and you have to vote, then you can vote on it, so it might take a little reiteration here.
I think, but you have to remember, if somebody brings a motion together or forward, that's fine, you know, you can have a seconder. If discussion ensues and you decide that that motion needs some amendments, you can do that. Or you can decide, okay, it's so radical, the suggestions are so radical that we need to defeat or pass that motion and come up with a new motion. So I think that would be the process. Councillor Trainer, are you,
I just had another, so if we, say we bring forward number 2.
Yep.
And then it's defeated,
but not necessarily,
well, I'm just using that as an example, then
Yeah.
would we come up with another one so that,
yeah,
okay.
whatever.
Okay.
You can, yeah, you
Because we
could,
have to get
It may no,
Okay, got
if
it.
we don't have a seconder, it won't go anywhere at all.
I got
But
it.
if we do have a seconder, then we are up for discussion. Okay, are you presenting that motion?
Sure,
Okay, Councillor Peak, you seconding?
I will second it.
Thank you.
so it's option number 2.
Option number 2, yes.
Yeah.
Councillor Holmes.
I'm going to recuse myself now because the
Oh, okay.
motion's on the table
I
affecting
forgot,
a
sorry.
organization which is applying for one of these exemptions.
Don't forget to unplug.
Actually, he's just going out for
He's
pizza.
on the board, yeah.
That's Suzanne.
You're not on any boards, are you, Mr. Mayor?
No,
Thanks, Dan.
they'd like me to be. Anybody else have any difficulties with any of the areas? No, okay. Okay, the motion's up for discussion. Counselor Peak?
I just want to clarify, the 113,600 is the same amount that we've done in the past,
Last year.
The dollar value of the 2015 approvals, correct?
this year. Okay. I just wanted to be clear that I understood that.
Okay, Counselor Carlson.
When we look at some of the numbers, application period 2016 to 18, 17 to 18, etc., we are currently looking at a 1-year PTE application, correct? That
That's
will be
my
changed?
understanding.
You could, I think in the report, there's other suggestions, but if you're forming a select committee now, then you would be better off just to pass it for 1 year.
So does that have to be part of a resolution, or is that?
That can be direction, can it not, after the resolution?
I mean, if, as long as we know that, we're gonna be doing it's the bylaw that you're gonna be voting on, so, this
By
is.
default.
Is everybody clear on that? That if we're looking at option 2, we're looking at essentially a 1-year term for that option. The select committee will be reviewing
We
everything,
would do a process
coming up with
after
a
that.
refinement process.
What,
Counselor Carlson, yes.
what day are taxes due? Is it July?
The first Friday
First Friday of July?
after July 2nd.
Okay, so if something goes ahead here and we decide on option 1 or 2 or 3 or 4, it gives these parties almost a year from today to make sure that that's part of their budget and their
Yep,
ability
yep.
to, I guess 10 months to make that happen. Am I on the right track?
Yep, as far as I know.
So, personally, I feel like it's definitely worth talking to these individuals and figuring out if there's ways to, and these organizations to use some of this land that may not be used to the best of its ability right now. And I also believe that we could encourage that to happen much quicker than giving them another, basically 2 years to make any changes at this
Well,
pace.
I think what it,
So I'm not in favor of option 2 at this
Okay.
point. I think that when the land isn't being used for what it claims to be being used for, and they're already getting permissive exemptions on huge amounts of their building and their space for everybody, statutory exemptions, sorry, I believe that it doesn't necessarily mean that they all need more, as much more as they've always received, or maybe should continue to receive in some people's views.
Counselor Peak?
I have some difficulty with that, but I've been longer doing this particular thing, so I might feel differently about how I would view it as a member of the public belonging to one of these groups.
Anybody else? Counselor Carlson?
But as a member of the public who doesn't belong to any of these groups, you're now sitting on the other side of that argument, right? And you have
Through the chair.
probably, let's say there's 5,000 people who don't participate in any of these, and they would probably appreciate standing up for the fact that maybe we're not gonna waste their money on those
Okay.
things. So that's more, I understand that there's both sides of that, and I do believe that it's up to us to make sure that that land is used to the best of its ability, and there's a lot of land in this town that's not used to the best of its ability. So we
Okay.
should encourage it.
I think to sort of, oh, go ahead, Counselor Turner, you did that quick. Counselor Barkwell in first. Counselor Turner.
I agree with Councillor Carlson on this issue. I didn't think that taking 50% of this amount here as a first step was going to be too much of a shock to the system. Or maybe there's another percentage and and say we're only going to allow 75% of these amounts this year or something to, there's a few $1,000s here I think that could be started with. At least if you're not comfortable with the whole amount, because this only represents a portion of what they're paying anyhow, so it's a
Yeah.
percentage of a percentage.
Okay, what I'd like to remind council of is that it's October 15th, the deadline is the 31st, correct? If we were to adjudicate this appropriately and staff were to spend the appropriate amount of time to get through this before the deadline. We have to be careful of that. I think the messaging that will come through on a 90% of the requests, which matches last year's, is still a fairly strong message to the public that we are looking carefully at permissive tax exemptions. And by accompanying that message with the thought or the ultimate motion of the formation of a select committee to do a detailed examination of each of the properties involved to arrive at perhaps exactly what Councillor Carlson has suggested, I think is a very acceptable approach to gradually bringing the assessments in line with what I feel, and I think what most of us feel would be the reality of the necessary exemptions. Because 90% of what's requested is going to bump everybody down to some degree. And then we need to look at things in more detail before the next period of examination. But we have to be careful right now in terms of how much time we're asking staff and ourselves to spend on this, when we can do a good messaging on what we're doing on this task and what we're planning to do as we go forward. So, but I'm prepared to...
I'm not suggesting that this has to not be dealt with today. I'm just explaining, and we don't have these debates very often because
That's a
we
good
often
debate.
agree on things. So I think that it's fair for us to disagree on this one, and we're going
course.
to continue to,
Yeah.
and it's going to be dealt with today, right?
Yep. No, I have no problems with, we can all, that's what we have the discussion for.
Don't forget that.
Councillor Traynor. Thank you, Councillor
Um,
Carlson.
I agree with a lot of the points that Councillor Carlson brought up. However, I think that given our timeline, I think that this is a fair decision because it's fair to everybody. So everybody that applied is getting something. And a 8% reduction is not very much to ask of those people who are used to getting 100. But at the same time, it shows that we are making changes and we're going to be looking at everything more closely in next year with the committee. And finally, it gives them some time, like it's not a big shock. So I think that taking a year to figure this out is a good idea.
Any other comments? Councillor Peak.
I think the philosophy of being careful in how you spend the public money, both for those that may participate and for those that don't participate in these particular functions and possibilities, is really important. So giving time to send the message, and I agree with the remarks that are made by my colleagues that this kind of reduction does send a message, and we will be proposing a process that will engage the public plus ourselves, because we'll advertise it to be an engaged process. Then I think that's fair.
Yeah, and I'd like that message to come through, CAO, when we deal with things at our public meeting, that we will be putting together a select committee as a further examination of PTEs. So, okay, are we ready to indicate to staff what we want? Ask. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, we have, it's defeated. Yep. Okay, so we have to have a new motion. We have to plan a new motion, so we gotta get there.
May I suggest that they bring up on the screen the 5 property, because I think what Councillor Barkwell had brought up was those 5 properties, and I don't think you have actually talked about those.
Would you like the maps brought up?
I'm just not sure, is all council comfortable? I might have missed it, I might have come in too late, when we were talking about the 5 properties that have potentially extra space. And I think the second sort of suggestion that was coming up is you go with 90%, but you do a little additional by looking at the a portion, whether or not it's 25% or of, so if 3,500 of Christian and Missionary Alliance was deemed to be excessive over and above what they use, perhaps not saying we don't want you to have anything of that this year, but we're going to take 25% of that, or 50, make some steps towards it. So you might be wanting to make a small message on that excess land, but not go too too far. So, is that correct, Councillor Barker?
That's exactly what I was suggesting,
Okay,
yes.
That's what I'd like to
I
see.
could get on board.
Councillor
Can I
Trainer.
just clarify that then? So, with the Alliance, for example, on that extra piece of land that they're not using, we would then, only allow 50%.
Or 25 or whatever percentage you
Okay,
came up
and
with.
then, and then on the other part of their property, it would still be 90.
That's right. They still giving them the
Okay,
exemption
so
on their
instead of
full.
90 over the whole thing, it's like 90 and 50 or whatever.
That's right.
Okay.
So we would still be going with, option 2 with respect to the main property,
Yes,
and then looking at their
Just
specifics?
that's right, just those 5
Okay,
specific.
and, let me get it right, but if we were to do, in other words, we would only allow them, say, 75% of the exemption on the other portion? Is that
Exactly,
what you're
or
saying?
whatever,
As an example.
as an
Okay.
example, 50%.
Okay, yeah, because I want to work the same way in the math. So if we're looking at a 90%, which is a 7 point something other reduction, and then I think it's entirely fair. There's no problem. I have no problem with it at all. That we would look at those extra pieces. But again, I think we want to be modest in how we're attacking that or looking at it. And I think to give people time and to have the select committee be even more refining on the task is to look at, is 25% where you want to be at, or is that too much, or is that like 75% on that, or is it going to be 80%, or is it 50%? Councillor Barkwell, then Councillor Trainer, Councillor Peet, and then Councillor Boot.
We're doing this without a discussion as to whether we agree with the boundaries and such that were drawn over the land that was considered excess. For example, the Summerland Recreation Society, which is the Rackets Club, I think? right?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. I presume the amount that was considered excess was those lots along the road, but I view that as somewhat different than, say, the Alliance land, because that is actually publicly used as parkland and such along there. The whole thing is used as public park, whereas the Alliance land has no public use. So I would look at it a little bit differently, but for the sake of simplicity at this point, I would just go with a blanket, like to propose and see if I get any nods for a blanket 50% on these. We'll reduce by a further 50% for these public use spaces that were identified.
And just for, this is the only one that's the non-church one, right?
Yes.
So your other option would be to only be looking at the excess space on the church lands. If
We
you-
could leave, this one could be out completely and
Yeah,
stay
you could
where.
drop
Yeah,
it
this
out
one
completely.
could stay out
Yeah.
into the 90% and just consider the 4 churches that have the and maybe you could just roll quickly through the
Yeah,
the
so we've
4.
looked at the first church.
Yes, that's the
in
Alliance
quite,
one.
in some detail. And so now the next one is Summerland Pentecostal.
So that's
It's the one.
So it's one the blue, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
the blue
yeah.
outline on this one.
Yeah.
So, in actual, I'm sorry, Councillor
I
Trainer.
just have a quick question. Is
Yep.
it fair for us to do this year? Like, what happens if they have a plan this year that we don't know about to use that property? Would that change anything, or are we just going on what?
We don't
know
know
right now?
that, do we? Because we haven't had that discussion, which was what the last motion would have satisfied.
I'm
Councillor
just
Peet.
worried that the Alliance Church, for example, could have a plan to have a garden there this year or
Then they
something,
can get-
or use it. I don't know.
I think we're.
I'm just throwing it out
If
there.
I might say, it seems a little arbitrary to me when we haven't done discussion. That's why I looked at option 2 as being an opportunity.
Why not go with a lesser percent then? If we suggest something like 25 and now you're offering an incentive, you're still getting the majority of their permissive tax exemption on land that personally I feel they shouldn't be, but into the future maybe they won't be. And that way it isn't really that much. And if they plant a garden and they make it, they use that land to the best of its abilities, and that the year after it will repay them in leaps and bounds, right? So
But I'm
And-
not, personally,
Councillor Peet?
that's 25, we would only offer them 25% of the 3,500 or whatever it is. And
No.
No, 25%, 75%.
70, I'm sorry, it's the terms I'm having a little
Yeah.
trouble
Yeah.
with.
That's what I was, that's what I was
That's why
chasing.
I want to
at.
be clear on what I'm thinking.
So staff did speak with this Christian and Missionary Alliance church, and they didn't indicate that they had any plans for using any of that.
They did or didn't?
Did not
Did
have
not.
plans, upcoming plans for using any of that area that's been outlined in blue on their property in the upcoming year.
I think if you look at the vacant lands that were identified, they're fairly significant, obvious, like that one, for example. I mean, it's very clear, the parking lot, there's no hesitation in saying that stays. The green land is obviously excess land where, and I think that they're all fairly clear cut.
Yeah. There was one
holdings.
organization that did speak about, I think this one, right, Renee? So we didn't include all of what might possibly have been considered excess because they talked about expanding their garden?
That's Lutheran? Lutheran.
Yes.
Yeah.
Lutheran.
So you might have before had the blue line go down to where the red numbers are there. But in their conversations, they did indicate that they may be interested in expanding, so they did not include it there.
On the Pentecostal church, it looks like there's arrows showing that it's kind of an overflow parking area. Have they said anything about it actually being used as a parking area? Just that it's not paved?
Oh, yeah.
No, we don't have any information about that.
See,
Mm-hmm.
part of the reason why, if we're going to do
How much is
something
there?
A lot of parking.
Congregation.
greater than what was suggested in the first motion, to my mind, we have to be fairly careful and modest in what we do, because we have not, as Councillor Peake said, had any discussions with these individuals or organizations. So if we were to go with something really bold, then you may end up, after review, having to backtrack. And I think you may be better off in sending the kind of message, gaining some dollars, it's not gonna be much anyway, and say going at, say at 25 or 75% of the total exemption, as well as the 90% on the balance. You're making some gains, you're making some messaging about the process that will be coming. But I'd hate for it to go so extreme that we do the review process, then we say, okay, well, we're sorry. We're gonna have to jump back to 75% because you are indeed using the place in a manner which we weren't clear on. Councillor Boot,
Sorry, I didn't get the chance to say this before.
go ahead.
I was thinking more along the lines of 90%, like just a 10% reduction. So
In
that we
the-
can kind of wean them off.
Well, that's sort of what I was thinking.
That's what I
90
was
and 90 is what you're saying?
90 and 90,
Yeah.
yeah.
So just back to the parking question here. This organization has 50 members in its congregation. So you can see there's quite a few parking stalls on the
Okay.
paved parking.
One spot for every member.
Pretty much, yeah. Yeah.
But these churches, remember, do have gatherings that will entail a lot of movement of people at times. Councillor Peake?
I could support Tony's motion at 90%. I think that the need to indicate, because the other motion wasn't supported, makes sense to me, but I do like the idea of identifying the process and working forward from that.
People have any comments? Councillor Barkwell?
I think you're talking $850. Yeah, it's not really a material amount we're spending our time talking about here.
I think that's not necessarily the point, though.
Yeah.
It's messaging.
Yeah, the point is that this council is looking quite carefully at PTEs. We've made a cap to last year's amount despite additional requests, which would have brought it up. So we've gone with last year's amount. We're having to redistribute and not give everybody what they wanted because we've only got so much money for it. The additional examination is property that doesn't really deserve the exemption. And what we're not clear on is how much of that we want to go after this year.
We would have
And I
a
think by
discussion.
sending some sort of a message, and I don't really care what percentages is, but if you go with a heavy hit, you're going to have a bit more of a tough time than a modest hit, followed by an examination by a committee that will do a more thorough property by property, congregation by congregation examination. So where are we at?
Tony, do you want to do?
If we don't have any more discussion, then we're ready for a motion.
I'm not quite ready.
Okay.
It has nothing to do with this. It has something to do with the concern that I have on here.
Yes.
And I'm sure that, just let me find it again. I have some questions around the Chamber of Commerce, getting a permissive tax exemption to that point, to that amount, sorry, not that point.
Are they exempt with their billing?
Their building would be exempt. Chambers are one that tend to be exempted in many communities because if they're not exempt, then there's usually grant and aids and further funding that goes with them. So it's, I mean, of course, council has the ability to determine whether you want to change that, but it isn't uncommon for chambers to be exempt.
Can you give us your?
It's uncommon for chambers?
It's not uncommon.
Oh, it's not
Okay.
uncommon. Yeah, the reason I'm kind of exploring a little bit is that, although it's not a grant and aid, there is the fee for service, and it's quite a bit of money. And I'm just wondering if, another 90% of what the request was is something that we should look at.
And again,
I don't know, I'm just asking the question, because
And
I know
again-
it's leased, I know it's land that we own and they own the building, I understand that now, but.
it's actually, and again, and as I said with the KVR, it's more important to look at, or it's usually more valuable to look at it the other way, to be a little more free with your permissive tax exemptions and bring that into the question when you're looking at the fee for service, because the bang is bigger on a permissive tax exemption. So if you're gonna, because it's not just our taxes, it's other people's taxes too. So, so you may give the chamber the full permissive tax exemption, but make sure that when you're having conversations on the fee for service contract, that,
That's
you-
acknowledged.
that it's
Benefit of
acknowledged.
That's not
that-
over and above.
That's right, that
Yeah.
it's incorporated into that this is thought of
Okay.
as a grant. Because that's my exact concern with going down, taking Kettle Valley down to 90%. My concern is, you're just gonna end up paying it, through a grant in aid, and they're not gonna get as much. So that's a little bit the same as the Chamber of Commerce,
Mm.
that you need to
Right.
bring the permissive tax exemption the next time you look into their fee-for-service contract.
Okay, okay,
Just-
that
Mhm.
clarifies it. So
Just-
then I am, sorry.
Okay, sorry.
So then I am okay with option 2 with the 10%. Not that that's on the table at this point, but that's
10% plus, you were saying 90 and
90%.
90? And
Yeah,
90.
so just a 10% reduction, so 90%
And
and
90.
90%.
Okay, just before we go to Councillor Barco, just to clarify, we have a 5-year contract started last fall with the chamber that is now $225,000 a year.
Yes.
I think 135 or 140 of that is license money. The balance of it comes through additional funds we give the chamber. Correct?
I think
Close
that's pretty,
enough?
I think that's pretty close.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I know we raised it considerably, and if, there was rationale why it was a 5-year contract at the time. Anyway, Councillor Barco.
Yeah, I understand that we're leveraging up our contribution by giving an exemption rather than a cash contribution. I was just curious how much, for every dollar in tax exemption we give, what is it in additional taxes that they save?
What do we have that number?
Yeah.
Every municipality is different, because it
That's it.
depends on your regional district
Mhm.
levy.
That's a concept that's starting to escape me here.
So in the case of the chamber, The total amount is $6,833. So 3,527 district only, and 6,833 for everything.
So 40%?
Is that in the report you first gave us?
Is that their full exemption or their full tax load?
The full exemption, so the question be, like, because what the concept I'm trying to say is that if you're thinking between a grant or a permissive tax exemption, go with the permissive tax exemption, because they're also exempt on school taxes and other taxes that
Yes.
aren't just municipal, so the
52 for District of Summerland percentage.
52%,
48 for the other
so
organizations.
almost half, almost double.
So yeah, almost doubling the
Yeah.
amount that you,
The
they're
the
saving.
benefit to them.
With the exemption we've been giving them.
Right, and so what I was trying to say with Kettle Valley Railway is that if we give them permissive tax exemption anyways, and if they're so ingrained with us that we cover their operating, and so if we reduce them down to 90%, and you know that they're gonna come back and be needing to top up their operating, you're better off to keep theirs at 100%,
Gotcha.
because if you give 5,000, it's the equivalent of giving 10,000 in permissive tax exemption.
Okay. So
I mean, it's just confusing it because it goes down, you have to pick and choose if there's any, but I don't know, is that the only one that we give sort of a core fund? Or we don't even give them core?
We
Or
don't
just-
give them court. They came in and said that they were considering purchasing some locomotives,
Yeah.
and we're going to be asking the district for some assistance. That was a conversation for them.
Right, so if it's not a given that you're gonna be giving grant and aid, it doesn't come into the
No.
question, I just meant
Mhm.
if you don't take it away, if you're gonna be giving it back.
Yeah, that wouldn't make sense.
Are they the only one? Sorry?
Pardon me?
Just let me find the list, so I'm not going by memory.
So are all these organizations going to be getting a tax bill then for 10%? Is that
No.
how it's gonna work then?
The exemption
8%.
won't be as much.
Well, 8%, sorry.
7.5.
Okay. So for example, the Kettle Valley Railway then would get a bill for, whatever, say it's $5,000, I'm just throwing that number out there.
No. Will it not be the number in the column, option 2?
She's
what they're
just,
saving,
yeah,
right?
she's just
She's
choosing
just
a
using it
random
as an
number.
example.
Yeah, so I'm
For
saying
example.
they're
They'll get a bill
gonna get a
whereas they
bill
didn't
for
get a bill.
10%. So say it's $5,000, that's, and then they're gonna probably come back to us then and say, okay, well, we paid you taxes, but now we need to top that. Like, that's gonna come out of their
Right.
operating budget, right?
That was all that I had thrown out there
Yeah.
earlier, was just to be cognizant of that
Yeah,
and make
okay.
sure that if there's any that you know, that you are their core funders,
Yeah.
that you keep that in mind. But if there's none that we are particularly core funding, then, but a chamber would have been a good example though. Had you cut theirs, they may have, you know,
I think where I'm having difficulty is, I kind of get the idea of 90%, which brings it to last year's cap or total, and then whatever percentage, but the one that's being thrown out is 90% of the balance of property may not be used for that particular service. That I kind of understand. But if there are these sort of inequities between properties and whether something has been core funded, et cetera, then it makes it much more difficult to sort of apply it across the board.
and I don't think it doesn't sound like it's really an issue.
It's not that large of an issue. Summerland Youth Center, so they traditionally have asked for and received $5,000 a year under the grant and aid process. Last year, the Yacht Club asked for $8,000 and received $4,000. And the Legion receives $500 each year for Canada Day.
Those are grant and aids.
That's what we're
Yes,
talking
grant
about.
and
Yeah.
aids.
So as
Yes.
long as they're not, and it sounds like those are all for projects rather than sort of core funding, so it's not, again, it's not that.
Okay, where I'm having a little difficulty is where, say an outfit like KVR is wanting, they see an opportunity to do more business. So they're looking at buying railway cars, et cetera. They've looked at their costing for doing that to expand their business opportunities. And, not having the numbers specifically, but if we're going to be impacting their budget by reducing the amount of exemption, then the only option they have is to come back for the grant and aid to try and top it up, right? But we may be better off to leave it at the full exemption rather than give them the grant.
If you felt that like you were going, if there was any of those organizations that you knew that you would be, for some reason you knew that you were gonna be providing them with a grant and aid,
Yeah.
the effect would be bigger by leaving it as a
Yeah.
permissive tax exemption.
Yeah.
We're not talking about big numbers here, I just wanted to make sure you were aware of that. If, I think in this case, it sounds to me that KVR would be the only one that would even be kind of in that discussion, and it might be not
Okay.
significant enough at 90% to
Yeah.
worry about it.
90% of the folk, because there's none of their property that hits.
No,
the
no, it's
extra
churches,
services.
well, now we're talking
Just the
churches
90.
over.
Yeah. Because I don't have a problem doing, say, something like 90 and 90, but going much beyond that, I feel like we're wandering around in a fog a little bit without enough information on individual operations and individual potentials for reduction and exemptions with property that may or may not be used. So I don't want to get too carried away, because the select committee will do a very close examination of each of these, because there's not a lot of them to deal with. Councillor Boot,
Could I
Councillor
just
Barkwell?
ask one other thing? Have we made a decision on whether or not to exclude the Summerland Recreation Society from the churches?
Yeah, we did.
I
We
think you
talked
decided,
briefly
Yes.
I
about
mean, you
that.
haven't passed a resolution yet, but you, I
Yes.
think that the
We decided
consensus.
to pull that out, so
Yeah.
they'll just get they'll get the 90%, but no further 90.
Yeah.
No
Okay,
further
perfect.
reduction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm, if we,
Councillor
is it
Barkwell, yeah,
resolution?
something?
Oh, no, sorry.
Hmm.
You want-
On the, talking about the Kettle Valley Railway Society, can you pull that one up? It looks like there's a lot of buildings, you're talking about the red circled area. Aren't there, they've got all the cars and the buildings and such, what land is that on? A little bit to the, below the, looks,
This land here?
yeah. That looks like the train station itself, doesn't it?
No, that's
No.
just, those are cars sitting on the rails.
So that property could very well be on the list
Like, yeah,
that
underneath
follows.
This one's a
Mm.
bit different because the listing is 2 pages long of all of their properties. So
Mm.
what we highlighted here,
the main
it's
one.
the operation and maintenance, is all of the properties. So we just highlighted the area that the society leases from the district.
Mm-hmm.
But what you're seeing on the other side is the actual railway.
Yeah, the tracks and the
Yeah.
station where you buy your ticket and
And it
everything.
goes throughout, like, it's a large area.
And that's all municipal, or that's all land that they
It's all
own
this,
and want
accompanying
exemptions
listed
included in
here.
these lots, yeah, okay.
I just have a stupid question.
No question stupid,
So,
believe me.
matter.
Maybe I'm just not getting this right, but
It's
if we
okay.
are giving, I'm just using the Alliance Church as an example, but if we're giving 90 to their, church property, like the property they actually use at the building, and then 90 to the other part, isn't it the same thing?
No.
No, 90 of the 90.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
So it gives them an
It's two-
indication we're making a
yeah.
change.
Yeah, no, I get that part. I'm
It's
just
two
trying-
calculations. You're looking at 90% of the full exemption, and
Yes,
then
and then
what's the balance is 90% on the property that doesn't appear to be used appropriately.
Okay.
Is that
So they
correct?
only get like 78 on the
Yeah.
non,
90 of the
90 on the
90%.
active and 78 on the
Okay, so that makes sense.
non-active.
Okay, I got it. Thanks.
Would you like to make a motion, Councillor Booth?
Yes, I would. I move that we go with option 2 as presented by Nicole. And for the 4 properties or churches or whatever that are identified as excess,
And then access to their needs?
land in excess to their needs, to, I'm not very good at this.
Well, 90% of
To,
whatever.
to reduce their permissive tax exemption request an additional 10% on that portion,
Yeah.
right?
Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, sorry, Katie, I'm sure you
Yeah,
can write
no.
it.
I
in a
think
way that
that's,
makes sense.
I understand what you said.
no, that's good. It's not an easy thing to come through, and
So these are the 90 and 90.
you know, actually, I have a hell of a problem with some of this stuff. I can't carry a lot of this stuff in my head at once, so, you know.
I'll second that.
Yeah, seconder for Councillor Peak. Any further discussion, are we, needed? I think we've gone part way in terms of, what some people desired and further than some others wanted. And I think probably we've made, what we're doing here is providing a message that we can follow through on and do some very, you know, good discussions and so on the whole PTE issue through a select committee. But I think the message we're putting out is a very fiscally responsible type of message. Councillor Peak.
If I might say too, I've had comments about the fact that we are actually having this discussion, which didn't seem to have occurred in other councils in the same kind of manner.
Yeah, you're right.
So the fact that we're being upfront and transparent, and these are open for people to attend and make their comments to, I think is really important, and we continue that process. That's important, both for our public that we represent and for ourselves as a council. I think it's the right way to be doing business.
I think it's responsible. Are we ready for a vote at council? Looks like we might be. All in favor? Thank you very much. Opposed? Unopposed. Motion is carried.
It's not getting mad.
Is that good, CAO? We're in good shape
Yeah, that's
for
right.
direction?
I ended up having to trade my work, so I don't have to be at work in 10 minutes.
The excess.
Oh, good one.
Well, thank you very much, everybody, and I appreciate
And thank you for
everybody's
your
patience with me, because I have a tough time understanding some of this stuff as well, so. Yeah, motion to adjourn,
Not
please.
unlike I have
Well,
times in
you
my
know,
life.
that's not supposed
So
Motion
to
to
not
adjourn.
opposed?
cross, it's like a,
Seconder,
No,
all in
one
favor
person
for
did
adjournment?
better than-
Councillor Peak, Councillor Carlson?
sorry?
All in favor?
Yeah,
Thank
sorry.
you.
Talking too much.
Get away with